In this episode,
You're pursuing something that's making your own life go better, or you think that going to school is gonna...
Yeah, I think it'll give me opportunities to be able to, have a better life.
Okay. Now, would that be a selfish thing to do, since you're doing something is trying to make your own life go better?
Yes, there's a lot of selfish people, but then there's selfless people. But I think the majority of people are somewhere in between, where they have selfish moments, but they also have selfless moments. So maybe you could just describe them as self-focused.
Okay. So maybe you just invented a new word that should be added to the dictionary.
Maybe I did.
We see trees all around us, and we've got a word for those. And we see cars all around us, and we've got a word for those. Yet there's this kind of action which is all around us, and we don't have a word for it.
Right.
That's weird.
It really kind of is weird to think about.
Welcome to another episode of the Selfishness Project, where we explore the idea of selfishness. Today I'm here with...
Starly.
Starly, okay. So I'm still on the BYU campus, and you just told me you came out of the BYU store, so you work there.
Yes.
And you're earning your way through school? Or?
I am, yep. I'm putting myself through school, and that's how I do it.
Okay, so maybe we can use that as a jumping off point here. Is you're pursuing something that's making your own life go better, or you think that going to school is gonna...
Yeah, I think it'll give me opportunities to be able to, have a better life.
Okay. Now, would that be a selfish thing to do, since you're doing something is trying to make your own life go better?
Well, yeah, I think it can definitely be viewed as something that's very selfish, but at the same time, if I am able to better myself, that will be able to put me in a position where I can also better help other people.
Okay. So you're doing both. You're helping yourself, and you're helping your other people. Now, is one of those your primary motivation? Like you're only trying to make yourself better so that you can help others, or is helping your own life the main goal here? Or is one of those, are they equal goals, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I think yeah, humanity is generally very self-centered, but I don't necessarily think selfishness is always a bad thing. I think that you have to be able to help yourself in order to be able to then put the focus off of yourself. So I think a certain amount of self-focus is very important. So maybe not call it selfishness, call it self-focus, if that makes sense.
Okay, so that's different than selfishness. So
I think, yeah, so a selfish person is very negative, and I think they only do things that benefit themselves. But I think a self-focused person is someone who makes time for themselves, but is also just a good person, and isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Okay. I'm wondering, why use this other term? If you had to give a definition of what does it mean to be self-focused,
what would that be?
Yeah.
So I think self-focus is you're kind of like a determined person, and you focus on what will make you happy, but it's not necessarily, because I think selfishness has a very negative connotation to it. When you think of a selfish person, it automatically you think of someone who's not a good person. But I think if you're self-focused, it allows you to think of it in a better way.
Okay. And I guess I'm trying to get at what makes it different so that it's better. You said a minute ago the selfish person only thinks about himself, whereas maybe the self-focused person does not only think about himself.
Right. Yeah.
Or herself.
So it's a person who they do think about themselves, because obviously they have to take care of themselves and provide for themselves. But it's also a person who will stop and help other people, or considers the people around them as who's affected by their actions.
Okay. So it's kind of a hybrid maybe between selfish and selfless. Maybe the person
Yeah.
who's selfless always thinks about others.
Right.
Selfish person always thinks about himself, and the
Mm-hmm.
self-focused person sometimes thinks about others, sometimes thinks about him
Yeah.
or herself.
So yeah, they care about other people, but they also care a lot about themselves. So it's kind of, I guess, yeah, a good mix of the two. I don't know. I've never really used that term before.
Yeah,
I just thought of it on the spot.
It's interesting that the term doesn't have a very widespread usage.
Right.
Self-focus.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this kind of behavior widespread? That, I don't want to prejudge it, but
Right.
would you say that a lot of people do have this kind of hybrid, sometimes thinking about others, sometimes thinking about themselves?
Yeah, I think that I would actually probably categorize the majority of the people as self-focused, because yes, there's a lot of selfish people, but then there's selfless people. But I think the majority of people are somewhere in between, where they have selfish moments, but they also have selfless moments. So maybe you could just describe them as self-focused.
Okay. So maybe you just invented a new word that should be added to the
Maybe I
dictionary.
did.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of odd that there's not, if that's a very common thing, there's not a common word for it.
Yeah, there really isn't one.
Like we've got, we see trees all around us, and we've got a word for those.
Mm-hmm.
And we see, cars all around us, and we've got a word for those. Yet there's this kind of action which is all around us, and we don't have a word for it.
Right.
That's weird.
It really kind of is weird to think about.
Unless maybe another way of describing this is just saying it's a hybrid
Mm-hmm.
of selflessness and selfishness. And we could always say that when describing the way people typically act, but it's kind of a mouthful. It's a lot to say.
Right.
It seems like it would be nice if there were some short, brief word for it, like selfish or self-focus, if it's a very common thing.
Right.
So, yeah, I wonder why that is. That
Right.
Do you have any guess on why there would be this common sort of way of acting,
Right.
yet not a simple short word for it?
Right. Well, I think a lot of the times humans over talk about things, like they over exaggerate, I guess. So when they see a person acting a little selfishly, they immediately determine that person is selfish. Or when they see someone acting a little selfless, they determine that person is selfless, even though a lot of the times it's different. So I think we never spend enough time getting to know each other to be able to determine them as something different other than what we first judge them as. So I think it's probably a judgment thing.
So maybe we're overgeneralizing. We see some particular action that looks selfish or selfless, and then say that's a selfish person or a selfless person, instead of just saying the individual action
is
selfish or selfless. And if we wanted to have a more accurate general description of the person, not just an individual action,
Right.
maybe that's where we need this other word, self-focus. Okay. Well, okay. I just thought of another question. Why call it self-focus rather than other focus? Because if it is this hybrid of sometimes being focused on yourself, sometimes focused on others, why privilege one of those ways of acting and make the label for that be self-focus rather than other focus, when it's like self and other focus?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there who helping other people eventually helps themselves. You know what I'm saying? So when I help somebody else, it makes me feel good. So is that not a selfish action? Because yes, I'm helping them, but technically I'm also helping myself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
So technically helping other people does help you. And I think if you recognize that, that's also something very beneficial, because so I think that can be under the self-focus term, because you're able to realize that helping other people helps yourself. So you're focused on yourself, I guess, but you care about other people.
Okay. Well then, I guess different people could act differently here,
Right.
but the selfish person, so the self-focused person, that's someone who in helping others, that's like ultimately it comes back to benefit themselves.
Right.
And that's why we might want to privilege the label of self-focus rather
Right.
than other focus.
Right. And you're not like helping them to help yourself. You are helping them because they need the help, and you care about them, but you also recognize that you feel good while you're doing service or say whatever you're doing. So and that is also something that you just do, I guess.
Okay. So, well, what is the motivation then? You said you're not doing it to
Right.
help
So I don't think
yourself.
it's self-motivated. You're like, I want to help other people so that it makes me a better person and I'm cooler, because that's a self-centered point of view. So you're helping other people. I guess that means that there could be like different branches of self-focus. Then there could be a person who helps other people specifically to help themselves, or there could be someone who really is a hybrid of the two. If that makes sense. So there's so many different avenues I think that you could go with that.
So there might be some people who, when they help others, it is because ultimately it's somehow benefiting themselves.
Right.
Others might help others not because it ultimately helps themselves, but just as an end in itself,
Mm-hmm.
like for no other purpose beyond
Helping them.
helping others. And those are two kinds of self-focus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess in the case where the person is helping others not because it benefits themselves, but just because it's helping others. So in that kind of case, why call it self-focus? Because isn't there part of the way they're acting is to benefit themselves? Part of the way they're acting is to benefit others for its own sake. So in that kind of case, why privilege that self part of it and call it self-focus rather than self and other focus? You know what I mean?
Well, I think I wouldn't necessarily call the action self-focused. I would still label the person as self-focused, but I'd say what they're doing is selfless.
Okay, so the action, the
So
individual action is selfless.
But the person might be self-focused. So it's really all a matter of just like over time, what actions is this person doing? Is it generally more selfish, or is it generally more selfless? And so I think these words are mostly described for actions and not for people.
Okay. So maybe it's not even appropriate to use the terms selfish or selfless. To say like that's a selfish person, that's a
Right.
selfish.
So more like call actions selfish and selfless, I guess. Although I definitely know some people that are mostly selfish and mostly selfless. So it's all just a matter of not labeling people right off the bat, I think.
Okay. Well, we got into a lot of linguistics there.
Yeah,
but
it was very interesting.
It came up naturally in the course of the conversation. So it's terrain that I haven't really covered much in these interviews. So I'm glad we got to go through some of that.
Yeah, it was very fun.
Gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for your conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be selfish or self-focused or selfless. I'm not sure what to say after all of that. But be well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.